Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about Pisces relationships part 2. And yes, this does apply and pertain to the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Now, many of you, or some of you, I should say, may have remembered the first series that I did on zodiac signs and relationships. That was more geared towards specific relationships for the zodiac signs based on what would be probable signs on the house cusp in solar and natal charts for those signs, where this is more geared toward generic and how they are, I should say how they are generally speaking in relationships. Anyway, people, first thing up as far as Pisces relationships part 2 goes. Well, Pisces, as many of you may know, is often very idealistic and sometimes even unrealistic in their relationships. They often try to overlook the transgressions and defaults of others. I see Pisces often having the rose-colored glasses syndrome, unfortunately, and that can apply to their relationships. Now, often, it's not that Pisces is necessarily oblivious to the defaults of others, but they just tend to not emphasize or accentuate them. They often want to see that glass being half full as opposed to half empty, so to speak. But Pisces has to remember not to delude themselves and keep in mind that the glass may often be half full, but not necessarily completely full, if you understand what I'm saying. So the thing about it is, too, Pisces can often be very intuitive and sometimes downright mediumistic, I think. And they often can be beneficial to friends in the sense that they can have often good insight as to what's around that figurative corner for their close friends, significant other, or what have you. Pisces doesn't, do this by doing all this analysis like, say, Virgo, their opposite sign, would, but they're more about how what they feel, what is intuitive. So they are. Sadly, Pisces can be guilty of self-deception. They can be delusional in relationships. They often may think others may love them more than they actually do. It's often, I think, attributed because they're so idealistic and they want to believe that these people love them so much, and maybe more than they actually do. Pisces has a hard time confronting like a negative or nefarious side of a person. And they just want, it's that rose, like I stated before, it's often that rose-colored glasses syndrome. I had a friend of mine one time with a Pisces ascendant, and I told him about some negative things and characteristics or what have you associated with this person that was prominent in my life at one time. And his response was, well, such and such is nice, such a nice man, the person I was talking about. Well, that kind of epitomizes the Pisces way, because they often want to see all this positive in some people, and they just really would rather not view the negative. And I was talking to a Pisces Sun friend one time, and I was talking about what I think were some of the negative characteristics of the Nashville city that I'm currently in. And he basically stated to me, he said, well, Eddie, it's not that, I don't remember his exact words, but he at least intimated, it wasn't that he disagreed with me 100%, but he just didn't really want me seeing it in that light. So that's very strong Pisces energy. They don't really they don't want to hear the negative or something adverse about a situation or a city or a person or what have you. They just really want you to focus on the good and try to overlook the negative. And it's funny that if you know a Pisces person, they often, their world often, could be very inviting and enticing, because they don't want to have anything really negative or evil or nefarious enter it. Now, many of you may remember, the older people out there, there was a show called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was on like a PBS station or whatever. It was hosted by Fred Rogers. Fred Rogers had a Pisces Sun and a Pisces Moon. And I mean, on that show, I remember like watching it when I was little, that it seemed like everything was just very, friendly in his world. And, I don't know if he had dolls in it or puppets or what. I don't remember precisely what was in this, the so-called neighborhood. But him having a Taurus ascendant, it's not surprising that things seem to be very peaceful in that fantasy world that was on the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood show. Now, another person had Pisces prominent in his chart, famous person Vincent Price, had a Pisces ascendant. Many of you may have heard him being the master of the macabre. And really, whether it was on that PBS show entitled Mystery, or whether it would be in some horror flick or movie, his world, I mean, it was really it made it very inviting, his world that you would enter. And it would be, even though it would be fictional and fantasy or what have you, he made it to where it was something that you wanted to enter. And Pisces energy often has that ability to do that. Now, Pisces people, if you know Pisces well and you're in a strong connection with them, you may notice they are often very well-meaning, and they don't like to be belligerent or recalcitrant, and generally don't have malintentions toward others. They could be very passive, very docile, but they often may abstain from physical confrontation, but they may stick up for their friends in a more subtle way. And the thing about Pisces too, on a negative side, if you are connected with the Pisces, they could be very deceptive and duplicitous. Many cases, it's not necessarily malicious, but they often just don't want to hurt other people's feelings. Pisces, and also too, if you're in a situation where you're in trying to exercise with a Pisces friend, or doing something, whatever it may be, that may require laborious effort, keep in mind Pisces energy, especially if the person is a Pisces ascendant, because that's really, I think, strongly connected with the vitality, and that's the physical constitution. Pisces doesn't exactly have an overabundance and surfeit of physical energy. I mean, someone like a Leo or an Aries that might have a much greater vitality and energy, they might be too much for Pisces to keep up with as far as the energy level goes. Now, the thing about Pisces often is about relaxing and meditation. They are not Pisces, remember, is the opposite sign of Virgo. They're the antithesis of Virgo. Virgo is known to be very industrious, sometimes a downright workaholic, where Pisces is more about laid back and resting a little bit more lethargic. Don't get me wrong, it's not like all Pisces don't do any work, but the work ethic and really just the nature of working in general is not as accentuated with Pisces or emphasized with Pisces as much as it is Virgo and even other signs in general. Now, another thing too about Pisces is that you got to remember they can often be very introverted, introspective, and they often want their solitude and seclusion. They often want to drift into their own fantasy world. So it's like if you're going through a period where you don't see Pisces for a little bit, generally speaking, it's not going to be anything personal, but they simply need that time where they could have their space and be by themselves. It's often to retreat from the harsh realities of the outside world. And really, Pisces may not get on too well with a more gregarious or extroverted sign like Leo or Sagittarius, because Pisces is, they're not about extroversion. As I stated before, they could be very introverted. They could be somewhat timid, and being a water sign, they have certain shyness connected with them. I would think of all the zodiac signs, I would think that Pisces and Cancer are probably the most timid and the most shy of the zodiac signs. So if you're about to try to embark on some connection, a friendship, an intimate relationship with a Pisces or what have you, often you may have to make the first move, because they are often very submissive, very timid, and they often need someone else to initiate that connection with them as opposed to the other way around. So anyway, And keep in mind too, if you're involved with a Pisces Sun, Moon, or Ascendant, they could often be very fragile and sensitive. And it's interesting, there was one time I had a Pisces Moon friend. Um, I had said something to him, jokingly one time, and he just, I said, did you go do such and such? And he said, he responded something like, I was getting my money, you butt, or something he called me. So, I mean, it's really, and he was obviously more sensitive than the typical Capricorn sun, and I could see it right in that, and what he stated. So, the thing about it is, you got to be very careful with Pisces, I've noticed, and really articulate what you're saying very well, so they don't misconstrue what's being said. Remember that there's a reason why, unfortunately, Mercury is in its detriment and fall in Pisces, because Pisces really, they often, I mean, they could be somewhat ambiguous and cryptic with what they say sometimes, but the other way around, a lot of times they have trouble maybe interpreting what's being said by someone else, and they may interpret it in completely another way than what you intended it to. Now, don't get me wrong, any sign could have that propensity to do it, but I think Pisces as well. So I mean, it's more emphasized and accentuated with Pisces. They have a greater propensity toward that, I think, than the other zodiac signs on average. Now, the thing about Pisces too, if you're connected with a Pisces Sun, Moon, or Ascendant, they some things they may be interested in as far as fun activities, obviously water activities, anything aquatic, swimming, boating, surfing, maybe oceanography can be something they may be interested in. It could be scuba diving, anything that could be water related, going fishing. Maybe they might even like to play the card game Go Fish, right? I'm just joking. But and also something of a fantastical or fantasy nature, such as playing fantasy football, or something that takes them out of reality, such as playing video games or a fantasy game like Dungeons and Dragons. They often are interested in photography, watching videos that have a photo montage, and even videos just in general, because Pisces can be connected with filmography. If your Pisces is somebody that's in school and in early education, they may be interested in like a chemistry kit or chemistry set or what have you, or interested in illusion, such as magic tricks, doing things, being a magician. Those things can really tickle their fancy, so to speak. And Pisces can also be very interested. If you know a Pisces, they may like to do things of a speculative or hypothetical nature, such as like going on, there's a website called whatifsports.com where you could actually have simulated matchups between sports teams of the past. Like, for instance, you could play the 1927 Yankees against the 1998 Yankees, and because Pisces can have a thing for what's fantasy and things that really can't happen. They like to go into their own world. So it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of Pisces sports fans are really interested in something like that, playing imagined simulated matchups. Now, as far as sports goes, now the thing about Pisces too, if you are involved with the Pisces, remember that Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, but they are ruled by a Neptune as well, and they have a greater propensity toward alcohol and drugs, recreational drug use, than the other zodiac signs on average because of this. So if you're around a Pisces, and especially if you know a Pisces that's really not much of a drinker or a drug user, it's really good to make sure you keep them in. You really encourage them to be in the right groups that wouldn't encourage the drinking and any drug use, because they could be very impressionable and more influenced by their contemporaries than the other zodiac signs. So it's really imperative to just really keep them in the right groups, the right people, the right contemporaries that will have a beneficial impact on them, and encourage them toward constructive things as opposed to destructive ones. So, and the thing too is, if you're in a situation, say you're in an intimate sexual relationship with a Pisces, of course, the erogenous zone could be the toes and the feet. They often can be into foot fetishes and massages. And also, too, they may often like to indulge in their wildest fantasies and maybe into role-playing. And it takes them into another world, being in something connected with fantasy, being somebody maybe that they're not, something connected with some kind of dress-up or what have you. Now, also, too, this could be something really where you have to be with Pisces too, going back to Pisces, is that Pisces, again, about being gullible and somewhat impressionable, that it's often, I mean, sadly, that trusting nature can often be exploited in their friends. And sadly, what happens too is the few genuine friends might have to be there to pick up the pieces for Pisces, so to speak. So, I mean, say if a Pisces gets duped by somebody, and sadly what can happen is Pisces may have to go to one of their friends and get that assistance from them, unfortunately. And it's just, I mean, the thing about it is, again, Pisces is really very well-meaning. They generally don't mean any harm, but unfortunately they have that tendency, I think, to get involved with like the wrong people, contemporaries or what have you, and it can have a negative impact on them, and it's really could be to their detriment very strongly. And the thing about it too is that Pisces is very, if you know a Pisces well, he or she is can be very sensitive to their outside influences, things that are extraneous. And I mean, the thing about Pisces is they could actually, I mean, they might be, I mean, Pisces can be very chameleon-like, and they can even often replicate others' behaviors. So again, it's really important and imperative, I would say, to make sure your Pisces is with, is really in the right, the right groups, the right people, and that he or she is encouraged to do things of a constructive nature and not anything that could be potentially detrimental or destructive to him or her. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Pisces Relationships Part 2. And stay tuned next time, where I am going to be giving you my Aries June 2018 horoscope forecast. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person astrologically speaking based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.